Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining a live stream, which is a bit different today because we get to talk about Capture on Mobile, which we haven't done for a while. So today I will be focusing on using an iPad, but of course this also applies if you're using Capture on Mobile on an iPhone as well. So no difference there. Welcome to those of you who are on YouTube. So if you'd like to ask a question, you can pop a comment into the live chat, and the same if you're watching on LinkedIn as well. If you're in our live streaming room, you can ask a question by going to the Q&A tab. Helen's helping out as usual. So that means if I can't get your question, then Helen can. It's not super busy right now, so I'm sure we'll be able to get to as many questions as possible. If you want to hide your chat, you can press that down arrow, and that will give you a bit more space on screen to see what's going on. So looking at an iPad online is a bit slightly trickier than just screen sharing Capture One. So we've got some choices. We can look at our overhead camera. We can also have a wireless broadcast of the screen, but the quality is maybe not so good. And there's a USB connection. The only issue with this USB connection, I need to pull that out soon so we can look at importing. But we'll see how it goes, and we can switch up views as we see necessary. Okay, so the purpose of this live stream is to cover some updates to Capture on Mobile, which have happened pretty regularly throughout its life, but there was a flurry back in the summer as well. Excuse me. So what we're going to look at is saving to external storage. So in this case, something like this little hard drive. Levels and curves, layers, a couple of tethering improvements. And that should take us up. And a quick reminder on cloud settings as well. All right, so first of all, I'm going to pull this USB cable out. So that cuts our screen sharing, or our high quality screen sharing, because we need to import from an external device. So before, you had to store everything inside the iPad's file system, which is fine, but if you're a bit short on space, let's say you're shooting tethered and capturing a large quantity of images, then you may find you run out of space. So if you equip yourself with a USB hub, then you can connect your camera and you can add in some external storage as well. Or if you're just importing from memory card, and again, you're a bit low on internal space, then this is a good solution. So I'm going to plug in my hard drive, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to say import from files. Photos is of course the photos that are stored directly on the iPad. I'm just going to browse to a folder. By the way, notice there's a handy little search term here, so I know the folder that I want to get to, and I'm going to go into this one, and we're going to open that. And then what you'll see is going to happen that Capture One will index the contents of that folder. So before that happens, then you won't see them on screen. So now we've got the contents of this folder of images. I'm just going to select a few. Let's grab the top row, and we'll say import down the bottom. Now, because these are on an external hard drive, you're going to see an option: add to catalog or copy into catalog. So add to catalog means that they be added, but they're going to stay on this external hard drive. So they're not going to be copied inside the file system of the iPad. If we choose copy into catalog, they will be copied. So let's think of the scenario if you are importing from memory card. You could have your memory card reader plugged in and an external hard drive, and you could import from memory card to your external hard drive. Or in this case, as we've already got some images on there and we just want to look at them in Capture One on the iPad, then we've also got this option. So I'm going to say add to catalog. So they're not going to be copied. They're just going to be shown straight away in Capture One Mobile pretty quick. So if we open up a shot, obviously we can see that in Capture One. Now what happens if we disconnect our storage? So let's pull that out. If we go back into our browser and then pull some of these up, you're going to see this note at the top, source missing. Now that doesn't mean that we can't edit. We can still do some editing. So if I brought up my exposure, sorry, too many clicks, David. If I brought up my highlight, for example, exposure, you'll see I can still happily edit the image even though it's offline, which is a nice deal. I can still export, but I'll only get a small size file, essentially the file size that we create as a preview when we import into Capture on Mobile. Now if I plug this back in, so let's just hook this back up. Then if we just pop back out to the browser so it refreshes, you'll see that now that source missing has disappeared. If, let's say, you move them around on the hard drive by accident, what you can also do once this shows up, source missing, is you can tap on that, and then that gives you a little bit of an info panel, and it says you can tap here to relocate your files as well. So if you have moved them around on the hard drive, they won't necessarily find themselves automatically, so this way you can go ahead and manually recreate. So pretty simple and nice. Can I add to catalog from an external source like iCloud Drive? Oh, I don't know, Alan, actually. I have not tried that, to be honest. Let's see, I'm not sure if I've got anything on my iCloud Drive. Okay, so we've got the same files there. So if I open that, let's just import a similar one. Import, yeah, same deal. So that's good to know. So yeah, they can stay on your iCloud Drive as well. Now, because Capture One will need to access the raw data, if they are in the cloud and not written to your iPad, then it probably will have to download them to the iCloud temp storage here. So if I say add to catalog like so, then it will be present on my iPad as well. So you probably won't actually save any storage, but it does mean if you want to just use iCloud Drive as a way to store your images, then yeah, you could do. Then it means they're of course available elsewhere as well. There we go. So that's working with offline storage. So now let's move this hard drive out the way so I don't knock it off. Let's plug our USB back in so we can do high quality screen share if we wish. Although saying that, might have to click a button. 1 second. There we go. I was getting slightly worried for a minute, but to be honest, the overhead works pretty well. Okay, levels and curves. How does that work? So let's just go and edit another image for a second. This one's a little bit too bright, so let's pull down the exposure. Now, when you're using the iPad, of course, it is designed to be held like this, which is why we have some tools on the left, or the tool tabs, and then the ability to make adjustments on the right-hand side. Now I'm going to use levels and curves. So rather than my hand, kind of covering half the interface, we are going to switch the tools to the right-hand side. Now, if you didn't know how to do that, you can tap up here on the right and you can say tools right. Now this will switch the tools to the right and those adjustments over to the left-hand side. If you didn't know, there is a nice way to actually use it in this configuration with an Apple Pencil, is that you can long press on the adjustment category itself, and then if I just drag up or down, then I have instant access to that adjustment. So rather than spinning the wheel with your thumb on the left and right hand, you can long press, doesn't have to be a pencil, and then you can just drag your finger or pencil up and down the screen, and then you have instant access to the tool. Nice. Let's see, just checking that question. Javier says, isn't there a function store an external hard drive? Yes, that's exactly what I just did, because I had this small hard drive plugged in. Sorry if that wasn't obvious. And then I left the storage on there, but could still view the photos on Capture on Mobile. So yes, external storage works quite nicely. Okay, levels and curves. But don't forget this way of adjusting, I find actually the nicest way to use it. So levels and curves, if we tap on levels, that's going to open up our levels tool. And if I long press, or I guess tap, long tap on either the handles, what you'll see is that the tool will kind of dim itself. so you can easily adjust what's going on. And then you've got the midtones in the middle, and then the shadows over here on the right hand side, and your output values up on the top. So essentially what you're doing, if we bring our histogram back, what you're asking Capture One to do is to take these values and map them to the figure at the top, which is why as I kind of move this slider to the left and right, you'll see the histogram moving as well. So imagine that I just want to take this bottom value and map that to the top value. So the more I move this in, you see the more the histogram moves over to the right hand side. That's too much because we're going to start blowing out our highlights then. What I quite like to do with levels is actually use the auto feature, because what it will do, it will snap the shadow and the highlights to either end of the histogram, which is generally what I'm kind of looking to do manually anyway. So if we just take levels away for a second, no, not do that. If we go over here to the auto function, so if I long tap on that, that will bring up the categories that you want to have under auto adjust. So you can tick any of these on and off. I'm just going to have levels on, like so. Says that. Now it doesn't want me to put levels on. 1 second. Let's come in. Oh, there we go. It was actually on. Right. So if I reset the levels tool, and to do a reset, you can just double tap on the tool itself or the tool name and it will reset. Now if I tap auto, then it will do auto levels like so, which you can do on a batch as well. So if you've selected more than one image, you can do an auto levels. So if we select those few images like so, and if we go back to adjustments, come on iPad, cooperate with me. Oh no, actually we can't, sorry, I'm talking nonsense. Let's deselect all of those, cancel, that's better. Sorry, I was off on a track, too used to using Capture One Pro on desktop and forgetting some things work in a slightly different way. So yeah, if you want to do auto levels, you can just set it up like so and do the tap, and then it will do the auto like so. All right, let's get back to that picture we were editing. Same deal with curves. So if we go to our curves tool, tap to add an action point, or basically 2-finger tap to get rid of the histogram, by the way. If you don't want the histogram, you can just do a 2-finger tap and then that will hide it. Tap to add a control point and then drag to adjust like so. And same deal with the levels tool. It will dim out the tool so you can see what you're doing as you add your control points. Question from Stefan, which I missed, sorry. And similar from Zach. Is it possible to open existing catalogs or sessions stored on an SSD on the iPad app? No, it's not. So what we'll look at a bit later is the ability, if you want to take some EIP files, which are enhanced image package, and transfer them over to the desktop. So we can do that, but it's not possible to open an existing catalog or session. Same question from Zach. Can you transfer copy this to already existing session or catalog on a bigger hard drive? Not in a super easy way, to be honest. So remember, the way the Capture One mobile is working is that it has one standard catalog, which is in the file system. If you want to export files out to use on desktop or anything else, you can use the EIP functionality or the cloud functionality. And we have a look at both of those so you know exactly how to get on. Andreas says, can you calibrate the monitor within Capture One to get the correct results? There has been some, I guess, tools available to calibrate iPad screens. But to be honest, I don't think anyone is using an iPad for ultimate color accuracy. Having said that, the actual color response from them is not bad. As I said, I have seen some tools available to do that, but with questionable reliability, I would say. So I wouldn't get too obsessive about that, Andreas, either. The actual color response, the display is pretty good. Like, no, it's not going to be as accurate as a calibrated ISO or something like that, but it's still not a million miles away. With regards to tethering to an external hard drive, yes. Yes, you could do that. No, you wouldn't be able to, actually. My mistake. Because what you need to do, and we'll look at tethering, is that you will set up an album. So we'll look at that when we go for tethering. But when you make a new album, and you can set that to your captured collection, then that will be internally on the iPad, but you can of course move them off as EIP files a bit later. So hold that thought when we talk about tethering. Fantastic. All right, where were we? Talking about curves. Sorry, that was a slight digression, but if I didn't answer those questions, I would have forgotten. So with regards to the curves, you can double tap on an action point and that will take it away as well. So it's actually pretty simple and pretty elegant to use as well. Now we've got the same options as on the desktop version. So RGB and Luma, like so. If you're unaware of the difference between RGB and Luma, it is quite powerful. So if we just do a quick demonstration with this, long tapping on an image, we can clone a variant. So we've now got version 2 of this picture. I will double tap on the curves and then that will reset it. And this one we're putting a similar Luma curve, like so. Now the difference between Luma and RGB is that Luma will make an adjustment to contrast, but it keeps the color stable. So what I mean is, if we look at the RGB curve version, and if we look at skin tone in particular, you see the saturation has gone up. If we look at the Luma curve, then if I just flick back between the two, so we've still got a similar level of contrast, but the color is much more stable. If we want to see that just on the screen feed like so for better color accuracy, that's the RGB curve, so you can see like so, and then this is the Luma curve, which we can see like so. So Luma is great if you think you've got your colors nailed down, but you just want to add a little bit of extra contrast without affecting your colors. But if you're used to using that on desktop, exactly the same. So no real things to learn there, but those adding points, removing points is super handy. Okay, question from Stefan again. If I use the cloud session functionality within files that are stored on an SSD, I could just have a session on desktop, connect to that, and then reference the files on the SSD when connected to a PC. Not sure I fully understand your question there. Remember, Capture One Mobile does not support sessions. But if you've got some images in a session on an SSD, yes, you could import to them in Capture. You could import them in Capture One Mobile. You could do some edits, but if you wanted those edits to reflect in the session, they would not, unless you exported an EIP. So I think it's best to think of functionality. You can't go back and forth between desktop and cloud, if you like. You can, of course, obviously shoot tethered here, import some images here, and move them over to desktop to finish off your work. That's really the intended or current designed workflow, I would say. Is an M1 necessary for tethering? I wouldn't say an M1 is necessary. You can tether even if you have a lightning port. You just need the Apple adapter, which converts the lightning port to be able to connect a camera for tethering. You cannot connect directly into that lightning port. You do need the adapter. But there's no reason why you can't do that. This is an M1, so it's not the latest M-powered iPads, and it's perfectly capable of tethering really nicely. But I'd say if you were going to do a lot and you were going to tether frequently, it's probably worth investing in an M1 system, just for performance, speed, peace of mind, and so forth. Let's see. Okay, moving on. So levels and curves, super nice addition. Currently, just so you know, you can't move the levels tool around or the curves tool, but it will dim itself when you start adjusting. So if you're trying to move it, it's not possible at this time. All right, let's talk about layers. So layers, what you'll see happen, I'm going to switch this back to tools left because we're going to be mostly looking at this little icon up here, which is where we access our layers. So layers on the iPad or Capture One Mobile is fairly similar to on the desktop. Not quite the same level of functionality, slightly different workflow, but lots of similarities as well. If we tap this, then that will bring up the Layers and Mask tool, and by default you will see the image layer. So the image layer is basically all the adjustments we can do to the background. So on this particular image, I think let's just reset this. So nothing on this image at the moment except for our image layer. So let's just make a few adjustments. I'm going to make this a little bit brighter, and what I want to do is add a gradient mask at the top. So if I press plus, I have my three options here: linear gradient, radial gradient, and brush. So let's go for linear. Then I can start drawing straight away. Now if I want to see the mask, I could turn this on, and then in red you'll see where the mask is, and we can rotate our linear gradient like so as well. And then whatever adjustment I want to apply to that, so let's turn the mask off. I want to make this a little bit brighter, so then that's just now going to happen at the top of the picture. Like so. Very simple. Sure you're used to doing that on the desktop as well. Now if I wanted to add a brush, I can tap plus again to make a new layer, and this time I make a brush. Now the first time you do that, or that action for any new layer, you'll see your brush palette. So if I want to change my brush to a different size, change the hardness like so, so I'm going to make this a little bit smaller, and we're going to have a nice low flow. And if you don't know what flow is, that essentially means that you'll be bringing up the mask very gradually. So I just want to pull the highlights down on this area a little bit. So I'm happy with that. So I'm going to go to highlights, HDR, choose my highlights, pull those highlights down, and then in my layers I need to add my brushing to that. So I'm going to tap add, got my brush set up. Do I want to see the mask? Let's see. So now as I brush in, that's going to be pulling my highlights down in that area. I can do a little bit over here as well. Tap add, do a little bit over in this section like so. So you can just see there, that's giving me an impression of what my mask looks like. If I turn off the layer, you can see the effect that it has. It's sort of super subtle. So I can pull this down a bit more and like increase my adjustments if I want to. And it's simple as that. If I want to delete anything from that, I can do. So if I go onto my, let's check that. If I want to subtract, then I can set my brush parameters once more, and then I can remove a little bit from that area if I wish. So pretty much add, you can brush into the image, subtract, you can erase from the image like so. You can add up to 16 different layers. So there is a limit, same as Capture One on the desktop, 16 different layers. There is a limit mostly down to performance. So obviously the more layers we add, the more calculations need to happen on that layer stack. And then of course there's an impact on performance. But as computers get faster, who knows, maybe we can increase that limit at some point. Let me just check for questions. Let's see, clipping indicators or rely on the histogram. Currently there isn't a clipping indicator, so you can, I would say, oh, my mistake, there is exposure warning. I just thought I'm about to say something which might not be right. So with the exposure warning, viewer options like so. So let's just try and go to the image layer, and then let's just blow out the exposure, and you can see it here like so. So showing up. If I remember, if we go to viewer options, or sorry, settings and feedback, under preferences, was it appearance? There you go. So there you can set your highlight and shadow warnings. I just remember that vague memory popped into my head as we spoke about that. So you have got your highlights and shadow warnings. So if we just completely mess up the exposure in the opposite direction, then you can see my shadow warnings creep in like that. So yes, it is possible. I knew that all along, of course. It's funny, just as I started spewing incorrect information, that little birdie popped in my head and said, no, you're not quite right there, David. So you don't have to rely on that if you don't want to. Aldo says, can I mix brush and linear gradients on the same masks? Yeah, so if we're on the linear gradient mask, what you can do is, let's say we wanted to erase a little bit as an example. We can do so, but what will happen when you start brushing, it says, do you want to rasterize the mask? Because right now it's a linear gradient, so I can always go back in and tweak the mask if I want to, or change how the linear or radial looks. But as soon as I rasterize, it's going to kind of set the mask as it is. So if we look at it now, it's still called a linear gradient mask, but I don't have the ability to change how the gradient looks, but I can add in some subtract. I can, sorry, erase and add in to the mask as well. So yes, you can combine the two. Let's look at a radial, so you know how that works. Let's take this one, like so. Sure, you can guess, press plus, grab radial gradient, and then where you start drawing, let's make sure we can see the mask. So by default, you will have the, let's get full screen. By default, you'll have the mask on the outside of the gradient. By the way, if you weren't sure how to get full screen, it's just a single tap. Much easier when you're playing around with linear and radial gradients. We can change the feathering by dragging the outer circle. We can rotate, of course, and we can change the shape of our radial by grabbing any of these 4 control points on the side, like so. If you want to have the inverse of that, you've got a couple of options. So we can either push this over into the middle and then it will invert, or if we go back into the layers tool here, you can also say invert mask, and you've got some other options like duplicate layer, duplicate and invert, renaming the layer, and of course deleting the layer as well. You cannot apply a style to the layer. I saw that as an earlier question, so no, you can't do that currently. So with my layer in place, of course, let's go ahead and I'm going to go to brightness, and we're going to cut the brightness down like so. And now that we've got our exposure warnings running, thank you for that question, then I can just open up shadows a little bit, and there we've got our nice radial like so. So if we just cancel out those layers, now you can see exactly how that looks. By the way, before and after, long press. So before, after. So long tap, sorry, I should say, before and after, like so. Let's see, is there an auto rotation and keystone correction similar to the desktop version? There is some keystoning. Sorry, I don't have an architecture picture with me. It's not auto keystoning, but you have the ability to make adjustments, but it's not automatic, just so you appreciate that. And next question, add needs to be used each time you lift off the pencil. Yeah, it's a good point, Paul, actually. Let's just go back to the layers. So yeah, if I wanted to add a brush like so, let's draw a brush. Let's go for small, and let's go a little bit softer. Nice low flow. Let's go ahead and go for a brightness adjustment. So let's say I want to burn a little bit. Yeah, so right now I would say add, and then I could add my burn adjustment in like so. And yes, if I wanted to do a further one, I would click add and then burn elsewhere. So yeah, I get your argument. Oh, sorry, I lost your question. Oh, I missed it. Sorry, I can't remember what you specifically said, but yes, you have to press add each time. However, I agree that's not maybe the easiest way to use it, and I've already seen some versions that changes the UI for this part, which will be an improvement, and it's not that far away. So what we do is, when that change comes, we do another quick refresh live stream and we show you how to use it. And before the question comes up, which is there AI masking coming to Capture on mobile? Yes, there is. So not the full suite of AI tools that we have in the desktop version currently, but we will start with simple things like subject and background masking, which is already being worked on and is also not that far away. So yes, some AI masking tools are coming. Okay, nice one. Moving on, as that covers layers, so it's pretty simple to use. Not massively dissimilar to the desktop version. You just have to keep in mind the need to tap add or subtract when you're adding a brush. And if you've got your radial gradient mask, you can add or subtract with a brush, but it will ask you to rasterize before you do that as well. Okay, let's talk a little bit about tethering. It's just a couple of things to note about tether capture. Does mean we have to lose our connection here. While we're doing that, need to unplug this one, and we're going to plug our camera into, need a bigger desk. We're going to plug our camera directly into the iPad. So we're going to go into here, and we're going to turn our camera on, find the other end of our cable, and put that in the side of the camera, like so. Make sure the camera is turned on, always a bonus. And one thing that I really wanted to point out is, hopefully with the camera actually tethering, somehow I've managed to turn Bluetooth on. Huh, typical. Was working absolutely fine. I can't remember if this is a two-way cable. I don't think it is, but just in case, I'm going to switch my cable around. It shouldn't make any difference on this one, but paranoia keeps us sane, as we say. There we go, maybe it is. So we can see here, if we go to camera controls, what I was specifically keen on pointing out is image storage options. So over here on the left hand side, now depending on your camera, the language might look a little bit different because we do pull some metadata into from the particular camera that we're working with. So on this particular one, which is a Fuji X-H2, you can choose the image quality. So let's say I wanted to have RAW on Capture on Mobile. I can also save to the card, and then I can have a variety of choices, like if I just wanted RAW on the card, or if I wanted RAW plus JPEG, and so on and so forth. So just be aware you've got those options there. And depending when you last were playing around with Capture on Mobile, the camera control menu has got a lot more extensive. So what you can actually control from Capture on Mobile is much greater now. So if you haven't explored tethering, then you should. You can also see how much storage you've got up in the top left-hand corner. Handy little indication of how much battery life you've got left as well. One thing to be conscious of when you're tethering, if your camera can pull power from USB, you might want to turn that off, because otherwise your iPad battery is going to drain because it's going to be charging up your camera. So if you do have the option to turn off USB power input, then that might be a good idea to do that. There's also live view, if you hadn't noticed that before. There's a very out of focus Capture One cap, which the camera is sitting next to. And of course you can go full screen, and the output is like pretty nice high speed feedback as well. And then we've got grid modes. Camera focus if your camera actually allows for it. So you see I'm so close to this I can't actually get focus, but you do have focus control if your camera is compatible as well. So if you haven't spotted that little live view icon, then really worth taking a look at. Nice. Donald was saying, why tethering image transfer always fails the first time. Check the camera firmware for that on the R6 Mark II, as I think that's what you said on the next one. So make sure you've got the latest firmware, because Canon did make quite a few changes to tethering protocols. So it's worth checking you're on the latest firmware. If you are, then just report it to support, but I would vouch that it's worth checking if you're on the latest firmware. Nice one. Gieton says, what tether cables do you all prefer? We have some that keep going bad. It's the eternal debate, right? So these are Area 51 cables, which I've had very pleasant success with. This one is a 5 meter cable, I think. Yeah, because it doesn't have any power boosters in it. There's one here which is this guy. You can see that's 10 meters or 30 feet in American. And this one has little USB boosters in it as well. If you do have a camera like the Canon R5 or the R5's Mark II, which are capable of shooting at 10 gigabits per second, then it's worth finding a USB cable. Area 51 does one, Tethered Tools does one, other manufacturers do them as well. Then it's worth getting a 10 gigabit per second rated cable because you'll be able to shoot a little bit faster. And it seems strange to, you know, limit the speed of your camera. Wireless tethering for Sony changes, you'll have to be a bit more specific about that. We treat a wireless connection the same as a USB connection, so all the same functionality is there, but there aren't any changes in that respect. We did do some improvements to Sony cameras in general, which means we could have a bit better camera control. So before, on the camera control with Sony, you could only tell the camera to go up or down in aperture or shutter speed or ISO. Now you can choose a specific, like you saw with that Fujifilm that was connected. So there has been some improvements for Sony cameras. It's in the later models. I can't remember off the top of my head where the cutoff is, but again, it's also relies on you updating the firmware in your Sony camera as well. So if you haven't done that, you're likely to see, or you're not likely to see, any improvements. You can connect a hub to the iPad, so you can shoot tethered, but it will be into the internal storage. It won't be possible to shoot to the external storage because it will use the catalog built into Capture One Mobile. The cable, Javier was saying, I don't know if it's written on here. Oh, you can see it on the tie strap. You can just about see it on the USB plug. Area 51 Tetherco. There's quite a few manufacturers out there. You've got Cobra in Germany, you have Luna in the USA as well. You've got here in the UK as an example, DigiBoutique. There's Juiced. There's a whole bunch of various cable manufacturers. So my recommendation is to try the one that you feel is within your budget, that looks good. Also, if you can get hold of one, feel what the cable actually feels like in terms of flexibility. The color is kind of important as well. If you're in a dark studio and you've got clumsy people, maybe black isn't the best color. So try to find something that shows up a little better as well. So there's lots of things that you can consider when purchasing your cables. All right, last thing I wanted to do was finish with just a note about the EIP format and also getting images from here to desktop to continue on your workflow. So a couple of options. Let's see, we did some editing to this image, I think. Yes, we did, before and after. Yep, let's just throw in a couple of base edits. So I want to go to my image layer. I'm just going to add a bit of contrast because I want to see this actually in the desktop version. Let's add a bit of clarity and some structure as well. So we've made a bunch of adjustments to this. I'd like to get it over to my desktop. Few different ways that we could do that. So a couple of things we can do is we can add that to our cloud. Now I'm going to have a problem with my cloud because I'm on a different license setup on my desktop to I am on here, so I can't show you the cloud option, which is why it's got a little exclamation mark. But if you guys were just on your standard all-in-one license, you can assign any album as a cloud-based album, and then you can pull it down on desktop, which I'll show you. What I'm going to do is plug in my external hard drive again, go ahead and say export, but I want to export as an EIP format. So EIP is enhanced image packet. I think it's packet or enhanced image something. So that wraps up the raw file and all the adjustments as well. So if I now say export, Capture One's going to ask me, what do I want to do with those files? Now I tend to use this method if I have a large quantity, because I don't see much efficiency in sending a load of stuff up to a cloud to download it again if I'm kind of right next to my computer or very close to the computer. I see efficiency in the cloud. If I'm just going to be driving for a few hours, then I might as well set a cloud album to go. And then by the time I get back, I can download at home. But if you kind of immediately need to work on your desktop, then exporting EIP makes sense. So I can save to my files. So if I save to this hard drive, I can save to that. And that's just going to write that EIP file directly to that external hard drive. If you're right there as well, so let's say EIP once more, don't forget you've got options like AirDrop. So if you just want to go wirelessly direct to your desktop, you can AirDrop everything. I use Dropbox and I've got Dropbox installed, so I've got a Dropbox option as well. So you've got lots of different choices, but AirDrop, external hard drives, using the inbuilt cloud system, loads of different choices. Okay. So if I just pull this hard drive for a second, let's put the iPad safely over there. Let's go into Capture One on the desktop. Let's plug this in to my hard drive. Sorry, plug this into my computer rather. And then right here, we can see we've got that EIP file like so. Now, if you're using a session on Capture One, this is super easy. You don't necessarily have to go through the import process. So all I can do is if I right click on this capture folder in this currently open session. So if I say show in Finder, bring up my external hard drive, then all I can do is just drag and drop this into the capture folder like so. Let's actually get rid of that old Capture One. So let's drag this over. Now I've got the image, and then as you see, very quickly it just popped because it included those adjustments that I had. So if you look here under the adjust, look under layers and masks, you can see my brush mask like so. You can see my linear gradient mask like so as well. So all those adjustments are brought across. Let's see. Zach, wasn't fully aware of your question, I don't think. If I've backed up a session or catalog, then added to the info on an SSD and need to back up to the larger HD, can I just overwrite the first one, or do I need to copy a second version? Yeah, if you're backing up a session to an external hard drive, first of all, I would use something like ChronoSync, because that's a lot more intelligent than just dragging and dropping. So ChronoSync, that's an application you can use to manage backing up all sorts of things. But in the case of backing up a Capture One session, what you would tell it to do, if we just look at this one, is to periodically back up this folder with any new content. So rather than trying to decide, okay, well, how much is new, what's the old stuff, what's already on my hard drive, ChronoSync will figure that out for you. So yeah, just use an application like that. Great. All right, let's just check for the last few questions and have a look. Oh, there are answer questions. No questions there. Let me just check the chat for a second. Can you control focus on the Leica SS2 and SL3? I think so. Don't quote me on that. Your best bet is to connect it up and have a look. But I can't remember. It's the same functionality as what we have on desktop, and I just can't remember off the top of my head what the SL2 and SL3 can do. But if it's working on desktop, it will be the same on mobile. I like that. This feels familiar. I assume people talking about the Tethered connection. I actually think that I can't remember if this cable is a one-way or a two-way, because it's got a right angle on one end and a straight on the other. And the right angle is designed for the cable, but I can't remember specifically this one is one-way or two-way. The longer one, the 10 meter, is definitely a one-way cable. So this will only work with the right angle at the camera end and the straight through on the computer end. So it's worth just checking on your cables with that. But generally, reliability wise, yes, you're going to end up with some trashy cables. Yes, you're probably going to break a cable because you're using them a lot. But if you look after them, you should get pretty good usage out of them as well. Nice one. All right. That's it for today. I'm just going to point out to the live streams page. So if you go to bit.ly/C1 livestreams or scan that QR code, that will take you to the upcoming live stream page. We're back on desktop on the 28th, which is a Thursday as usual. Back on desktop with a deep dive into people masking. So if you haven't tried out people masking yet, which is the ability to pick out attributes not on plates of food like so, but on different human attributes. So we're going to look into more detail for that. Nice one. Last question I saw. Yes, paddler. We just literally covered that at the end. But you can rewind this. So if you hop over to YouTube and find our channel, you can rewind this. And then this way, you'll be able to see what we did. Yeah, but I spoke about exporting to EIP and then transferring those over. And there's a few different ways you can do that. If you did want to use the cloud transfer, you can click on the cloud transfer button here. And then you can import from your cloud albums. Oh, there's the cloud album like so. Or you can use AirDrop, iCloud, Dropbox, pretty much any system that you want to. Nice one. Oh, there is a grid view on mobile. At least there is. That was a question from Donald. There's a grid view on the live view. So you can also use that for composition. Nice one. Well, thanks for joining me today. I hope that was useful. Yeah, have a go on Capture on Mobile if you haven't yet. As I said, you saw me working on the iPad today. Same information possible on iPhone, just with a slightly different UI, but the potential for editing adjustment, shooting tethered is all exactly the same. Great. Enjoy your weekend when it gets here and hope to see you soon. Bye now.